Hello world. So today we're going to focus on creating a REST API using TypeScript, MySQL, Node.js, and Express. Right? We're going to test at the end with Postman, but I'm not too concerned with Postman as of yet. I just want to be able to create that REST API. So let's get to it. This is a configuration for the SSH for the localhost, and I'll explain that in a second. We're going to forward a port, and we're going to forward it to port 3307. That is the local port. We're going to forward from the localhost remotely, and the port that we're going to forward is 3306. The reason we're forwarding 3306 is because MySQL and SQL services in general, database services, will speak or connect through port 3306, and this is my DHVRS config file title, so I don't have to enter my IDs. I already have my config file formatted and named DHVRS, and if we enter, we're going to be able to log into the Ubuntu server, and then what we need to do is htop in order to look at memory and the like. Okay, so because my VS Code server already has a shortcut here, as you can see, I want to go to the var www folder. I can actually click this. However, for the sake of this tutorial, let me show you how to do it manually. So what I'm going to do is Control-Shift-P to bring my actually, no, that is incorrect. I'm going to go ahead and click on this guy down here because it gives me the commands right away. And I'm going to go ahead and connect current window to host. If I could find the actual, here it is. So, like I said, I have my host information, IP address, user codified in my config file on my .ssh file. So all I have to do is select that guy. What it's going to do is that VS Code is going to automatically connect me to that. Actually, I don't know if it's going to connect me to that var directory. I can actually go ahead. It actually connected me to the root of my home user. So what I need to do is hit that connection, or I could also say connect to a specific folder. But because for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going to provide full tutorial on SSHing or any other one particular aspect because we will be here forever. I already have a terminal open. It's already giving me some talkback because I tried to make directory before, but I'm going to clear all that because we don't need that. What I am going to do here in this terminal is to start creating the directory and give it the proper permissions. Remember, we're in Linux. We need to make sure that we properly create the permissions for everything we do. So first of all, I'm going to make the directory off of var www. By the way, in Linux, if you want to know what working directory you're in, just say present working directory. That's the one we need, var www. And we're going to sudo as a super user make directory. We're going to flag it with P and var www and REST API. Sorry, I'm not very imaginative when it comes to names. So we're going to go ahead and create that directory. Let's go ahead and see if that directory has been created. Let's lsla with all the attributes, and we can see that yes, indeed it is. But what the issue is, if you notice, our user's still root because we sudoed in order to create that directory. So we have to shift all that. We have to change the ownership, and we have to do a number of things here. So just bear with me. Let's go ahead and sudo chown, or change owner. Let's go ahead and do it recursively. And I'm going to give it to Ubuntu. I'm going to provide that ownership to the Ubuntu user, which is the user that I currently use in order to log in. And I'm going to go ahead and say REST API. So now if we LA again, guess what? Our user is now our owner, and owner group are now Ubuntu. Let's go ahead and clear that again. And again, I don't want to dwell too much on the Ubuntu part of the operation, the Linux part of the operation, but this is necessary. This is actually very important and very pertinent to what we're doing here. Sudo chmod, and I don't see enough people speaking on this. They kind of just the tutorials that I see online, they kind of just assume that you're going to know this, and I know that I had a hard time kind of chasing this down, as it were, when I was first starting. So chmod R777. Why isn't it accept? Oh, I'm missing a W. See? Sometimes you got to tab your way into the command, otherwise you might mistype something and the command will just go haywire. So what I'm doing right here is I'm changing the module. But I actually don't know what that mod means. It just means it's changing the permission structure, right? So it's regressive. So sudo chmod flagged with capital R, which is not regressive, but yeah, it is regressive. That means it's just going to kind of go through all the folders and change the same permission structure throughout the folders. And 755 is going to give me, the Ubuntu user, full control, 7. And then 5 is going to give execute and read write to any user that enters that folder. It could be a user from the outside, the World Wide Web, or it could be a user within Ubuntu. They will only have right to read and execute the commands. So let's go ahead and see what happens when we do that. And let's go ahead and LSLA again. And now we see that Ubuntu owns it, but the permission structure is set to directory, because it is a directory, read, write, and execute for the user Ubuntu, but it's set to read and execute for any other user outside the Ubuntu group or Ubuntu himself or herself. Okay, so next we have to add our group to the www.data group, and I'll explain why we're doing that. Sudo, and we're gonna go ahead and user mod with a flag of A and a flag of G, and we're gonna say www data and Ubuntu. Now, why am I doing that? Oh, maybe I typed something wrong. Hold on. It's telling me www doesn't exist, but I'm sure it does. So there's something awry here. Oh, there it is. I mistyped it again. You see what happens if you don't tab into the commands? You can certainly mistype something and then you go crazy trying to figure out what you did wrong later on, trust me. So we've included Ubuntu into the www/data group, and the reason we're doing that is because that www/data group is actually our Apache. So Apache is going to need to have access to those files. They're going to need to be able to play with them. Okay, now we're going to have to create a new virtual host config. This one's a little more obscure, to be sure, but as you can see, we're going to nano into the etc Apache 2 sites available REST API config. We're going to nano in. By nanoing in at first, it's just going to create a blank document that we're going to need to edit, and these are the actual edited values. So we're going to play with a virtual host 80. We're going to keep it HTTP for now. In order to secure it later on, you will go through a number of steps. You'll have to research that on your own. I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm just going to probably configure this with a local host configuration, and I'm going to work with this local host HTTP without the S. In other words, it's going to be insecure, but it's going to be in a local host. So I don't want to get too wordy about that. The bottom line is we're going to have to Control X out of this to be able to save the modified buffer, and we're going to go ahead and name it RestAPI config. So the next step in this is to actually create the, or actually embed it into the Apache configuration. So that part is a little trickier. We've already kind of did our thing. We created the RestAPI config. Now we're going to have to go ahead and kind of A2N site, which means we make it active. It's already enabled. I had done that before. I apologize. And now we're going to go ahead and restart Apache. Let's see how that goes. I suspect there's going to be an error here. Okay, so it's asking me to use the status Apache service. So let's just type this out. So sudo systemctl. Again, I'm tabbing into status Apache 2. Let's see if we could figure out. Okay, it's telling me it failed. Okay, good. This is lines 1 to 13. I'm going to go ahead and spacebar into the rest, and I'm going to right arrow into the actual syntax error on line 2 of, let's see what's going on with line 2 there. So let's go ahead and Control C out of this, and let's go ahead and I have the command still in my buffer. There it is. Let's go ahead and nano back in there. It's telling me line 2. Oh, look at that. Replace with your domain. So it didn't like this at all. So let's go ahead and kill this line. We could actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and server name. And let's just say Alexander. .us. I actually own this, but we're going to go ahead and comment that out with a, let's go ahead and X, let's say yes, modify it, and let's write it to that same line. Let's see what happens now. Let's see, that's status, and that's a restart. Oh, look at that. So we commented out that line. We don't need it. We're going to do localhost at first testing, so we can go ahead and proceed now. So we troubleshooted that actual structure. We commented out the line, but we left it there so we can refer to it in the future when we need to actually put a domain name in there. Let's go ahead and log into, or rather navigate to our REST API. So we're there, and we're going to go ahead and use npm init. We're going to use, I'm going to use npm. There's other Node package managers out there like Yarn. I'm more comfortable with npm init. It is kind of a messy ordeal for sure, but I'm very comfortable with it. So let's see here. So we should have a package.json. Oh, by the way, I've got this part. Let's go ahead and open our new folder. So open folder, and it's going to ask us what folder do you want to open, and we're going to say www, and then we're going to go ahead and say REST API. I always confuse this because Visual Studio Server, you can't tab into those commands. You have to physically type them out. But it will show you kind of like a nice little, visual of what my options are. Right there, it showed me the file structure, and it showed me REST API. So again, here we are. Package.json, it's already been created. Again, Control-Shift-Tick in order to open our terminal, right? And at this stage, we can go ahead and install all our necessary packages. I'm going to copy and paste these commands because I'm not going to type through this. It's just too painful to watch me type and make mistakes. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste these commands. I want you to be aware of what I'm actually typing and pasting here. I'm going to type and paste, rather install express TypeScript, add TypeScript, add types express, add types node, ts node, and node daemon. Right? So let's go ahead and enter. That's going to take a little bit of it's going to take a minute or so. All right, so let me explain what these commands actually mean. Obviously, npm is going to be our node package manager. Install express. By the way, I've already created configuration, so I don't have to sudo the npm install. That's not something I can get into here, but just believe me when I tell you sometimes this will fail. It's going to ask you for sudo, but what you want to do is configure your Ubuntu user properly so that you could actually npm install in your directories. It's part of the reason we went ahead and did all of those change mod and change ownership commands so that Ubuntu would own the directory outright and not have a lot of issues with installing and creating files. All right, so npm install express, so that is the actual install package express. TypeScript is another npm install package, and TypeScript doesn't come baked in, or rather Express doesn't come baked in with TypeScript support. So add TypeScript Express is the package that helps TypeScript speak to Express, and a TypeScript node or a types node is the package that will help TypeScript speak to Node. TS node is the TypeScript support package for TypeScript to be able to speak to Node, and the a node daemon is going to be a simple app that allows you to debug while you're running the code, and hopefully we'll get to that. And I also want to do some testing, but I'm afraid this video is already getting a little bit long in the tooth. Okay, so as you can see, we installed our packages. Everything seemed to have gone successfully, and it created a folder called a node module. So what we need to do right now is actually create a gitignore file. So this is going to be crucial for all your projects. This is not a Git or GitHub lesson, so I'm just going to give you some basics, but there is a lot more to Git than I can get into in this video, which is already getting somewhat longer than I really anticipated, to be honest with you. So let me just copy these commands. Again, I'm going to start copying and pasting commands because it is painful to watch me kind of peck my way through these commands and not really do anything of value. So I'm going to echo the node modules dist.env into a gitignore file right at the base of my REST API folder. So there's a few ways to do this. This is again an Ubuntu server. As you can see, I am logged in as Ubuntu. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and you will see that a gitignore file automatically gets created with these variables. Okay, more obscure Linux commands, but I will try to be a little more clear about what we're doing here. So again, sudo chown, and again, by the way, this isn't regressively, it's recursively. I always get those two words mixed up. By the way, you're going to get words mixed up, no matter how advanced you get. There's just so much vernacular out there that it's just impossible not to mix up words. So recursively, we're going to take ownership of our node modules. This is not really a necessary step, but it is something that we want to do just to make sure we don't have issues with Node. And also, we're going to find files in our directory which allow us to this particular command is going to search for files under the directory REST API. It's going to look for files, not directories. That's what the flag F is for. It's going to execute change modify command on those files, which is going to create owner can read and write group can only read and others can only read. This creates a second layer of security for our files, so that if we are attacked some way somehow, whoever user cannot just sit there and change our files. They can read them, but they won't be able to modify them or execute them. We're also going to do that for the file structure. So we did that for the, for the directory structure. We did that for the files. Now we're going to go ahead and do that for the directories as well. Okay, let me go ahead and get into this really quickly, because this is very important and I kind of glossed over it before. So in this find function, where we're changing the mods for REST API, that is to say, we're changing the permission structure. In the previous command, you see that we changed the mod to 644, which allows the user, the owner, rather, Ubuntu, to read and write files, right? And it allows other users outside of the Ubuntu group or outside of the world, in the World Wide Web, to only read the files. That's what the for stands for. In this new command, we gave full ownership, read, write, and execute to the Ubuntu owner, and we gave read and execute. That's what the 5 stands for. So I don't want to make this a lesson about Ubuntu and Linux, but these are crucial, albeit wonky, necessary steps to understand fully. And we're going to install TypeScript at types at express, at types node, at types cores, and at types nodemon or node daemon. What this does, this particular cores, cross origin, I forgot the S, but what this does is allow permissions properly to be able to it permits users to be able to access certain files. So this package.json is fundamental. If there are already elements that have been installed, Node is smart enough to just either overwrite them with this new install version, or just ignore them altogether. So let's go ahead and run this package and see what happens. Okay, so there's always a lesson to be learned, even as a senior developer, which I'd like to believe I am. When you hit that install npm or npm install command, make sure you close the package.json, or else you'll run into some issues. So I worked my way around it. I actually closed it and reran the install. What you will notice right now is that we have a subcategory called dev dependencies. And this is necessary because when we build our packages, it will look at the dependencies or build dependencies to be able to build that package when we do go ahead and build, if we need to build a package. And while we're developing, it already knows that we're just developing, so it doesn't use all the dependencies on the regular build dependency. What's more, it's going to create a script. It calls it test script, but there's a dev script as well. And we can actually type out these scripts later on, but that's for another, that's for the future. It's getting a little long. Okay, we can start creating the basic project structure. Again, I'm going to just copy and paste for the sake of timeliness. We're going to make directory src. We're going to make directory src routes. We're going to make directory src controllers. We're going to make directory src config. We're going to make directory src models. Just to kind of give you a pretext or context of what we're doing. Routes is going to be the directory that's going to handle our routing. Controllers is basically going to be able to talk to the routes director and control the routing. I'm sorry, I'm not very good with explaining simple definitions. And our config directory is going to carry the configurations, and our models directory is going to carry a lot of the database components, just so you know. Again, all these are going to be within this source routes src directory. So boom. we can see our src directory is created, and we can see all our funky little subdirectories therein. Okay, let's start actually creating some files. We have set up our directories. Now let's start creating some of the project files. So within the root of the directory, which is this REST API folder, we're just going to go ahead and create a .env file. This is just going to manage our environmental variables. I'm just going to go ahead and open it on VS Code. It's going to be blank because we haven't echoed anything into it. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy all our, or rather paste all our variables here. Now it's actually pointing to host 3000. I personally don't like using host 3000 just because there may be other apps. It's a default port that it uses, so I just switched it over to 3001. It's not a big deal. Our DB host is going to be localhost. It's probably going to be 3306. Your SQL user. Now I'm going to set up a SQL database in the background. I'm not going to get into that in this video. Again, the reason I'm not going to get into this is because this video is already getting pretty long, and as comprehensive as I want to be able to provide this tutorial, there's such a thing as being too comprehensive. Above and beyond that, some people choose not to use a SQL database. They may configure it with a MongoDB database, which is a completely different beast, although they both store data. So your DB user, your DB password, your DB name. Now again, I want to reiterate how important it is to create these variables or store these variables in a .env file, because remember, again, our gitignore file is going to ignore the .dnv. So go ahead and fill this out as best you can, pointing to your actual database. I will do the same. I'm not going to share that part with you guys, but I will do the same. And then when we're in the app, we could actually use these variables in that point to the actual values, as opposed to inserting our values into the app itself. That's why it's a secure way to manage our database. Okay, so let's go through the MySQL Workbench configuration. I want to make a point of noticing that this port is pointing to 3307. I know I used a root user, that's a no-no, but this is a development environment, so we can get away with some of these no-nos while we're developing. I'll obviously create a non-root user to do this in production, but for now, this is how I have it set up. As you can see, the port is 3307, which is listening on. That was actually forwarded from port 3306 in the Ubuntu server, if you can recall. When I flagged with capital L, that was a forward, and I forwarded port from the localhost in the Ubuntu localhost :3306 to port 3307 locally. So I am able to basically connect remotely. So this MySQL Workbench is installed locally in my Windows, but it can connect remotely to the NVRS database. And I have a set of tables here: employees, menu items, order timestamps, and patron. That's about it. Okay, let's finally create our working API. So first things first, we are going to just touch on the source app.ts. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that. You will notice the source directory here will be filled with this app.ts. Boom. So let's open our app.ts and let's go ahead and copy and paste the code. I will go step by step on this. All that said, at this stage, I'm just trying to get this done because we are taking a very long time to do this. Like I said, I'm going to go step by step on everything that's happening here. I went ahead and created, actually AI went ahead and created these nice little comments here. So I can't take credit for that. But this AI is pretty solid about what it does here. So as you can see, the .env config, it called that .env config. It called Express, and the app is going to be running as Express. But again, I'm going to go back and walk through these items. For the time being, I believe we're ready to play with our package.json. And as I said before, we are going to go back and forth with that package.json. Let me make sure I have the port right. Oh, I need to be in the right file here. Let me drop this terminal because I don't really need to use it that much anymore. So let me just make sure that all this code is coherent. Yes, our port is going. I'm going to go ahead and correct that as well because I don't want it running on port 3000. I want it running on port 3001 again, and that's only because 3000 is a default port, and I don't want it conflicting with anything else that may be running on my environment at the time. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and go back to our package.json. And within the script section, and there should be a script section, we're going to go ahead and insert some additional values. So within this script section, it says test, but we need something more along the lines of dev, build, and start. Remember how I told you there was a build script and there was a start script? So now that we've gone ahead and done that, let's go ahead and save. If I had my GitHub repo set up, and I've only set up the gitignore, you would see this guy kind of lighting up. There's a lot of files that need to be uploaded to the repo, but I'm not going to deal with GitHub right now. Again, I think we should be good. Let's go ahead and npm run dev. And I may need to switch out the screens because you might not have access to what I'll be seeing. Looks like node mine is starting. Oh, it crashed. It crashed. So what is the error message? Error. Listen. Address already used. Oh, see? This is very likely, and that's the very reason I wanted to change all this. But we can actually change this. I can't show you my environmental variables, but we can change it at least in the app.js, which is already in use, and I'm going to go ahead and do a search for it. 3001, here it is. Let's switch over to 3002. Let's see if it likes it any better. So it's starting again, it's crashing again because it's pointing at 3001, and 3001 has already been taken. So let me just stop right here and change my .env file or .env file. Okay, so that worked. As you can see, the server is now running on port 302. I have a port forwarding utility by which I can forward these ports. I didn't configure this app to do it properly. So I'm going to forward 3002 to my localhost here locally, 3002. And when I call this, it's going to open up a browser, but I could actually just copy and paste it. No, I actually need to do it with the cannot get, and that's fine. Okay, so it did forward that port 302 to my local port 302. So you'll see that localhost 302 or 3002 is actually returning a cannot get. That's because we just haven't provided anything. The only thing that we have provided at this stage is a short console log to the console. Server is running on port 3602. So we passed our sanity check, right? We now have a working Node.js or Node.ts server, really, that basically is running on port 3002. I also promised that I was going to go through the actual code and basically lay out exactly what's going on here. We're going to go ahead and import. By the way, I always forget to do this. This is very necessary. It's going to be a Alt-Z in order to what do you call this? Wrap the line. So we're just going to import Express. We're going to import cores. We're going to import .env from .env. We're going to go ahead and load our environmental variables. We're going to initialize our Express app and call it app. So we create a constant called app and we initialize it as Express. We're going to go ahead and app use our cores, app use our express.json, app use our express URL encoded, and we're going to go ahead and app use, and then we're going to basically wrap error, catch and try kind of functionality into this. Again, this is TypeScript, but it's still a superset of JavaScript, so a lot of the premises of JavaScript still apply. TypeScript is a legitimately object-oriented language, so there is going to be some differentiation there, but a lot of the same basic premise still applies. We're going to go ahead and API test. So we're going to get the API test. This is where it failed, I believe, when we saw our browser locally. It went to get a file, an API test, and it requested a response, but we don't even have an API/test folder yet. As you can see, we don't even have an API folder yet. So let's go ahead and do that next. But we also want to walk through some of the server configurations, right? So the port, again, 3002. And in case it doesn't work, so we do a double pipe. And if something happens with this variable, the double pipe gives us an option. It's kind of an OR option, 3002. And we're going to go ahead and app.listen to on port, which is 3002. And then we're going to go ahead and log that out. And that's what we saw here when it said server is running on port 3002. And as if what we're dealing with right now wasn't kind of convoluted already, I'm going to go ahead and include a second Git-Bash that I've already logged in to. I've already tried running the sanity test again, and it went ahead and failed on my curl. So I attempted to curl the HTTP localhost 3000 api.test, but again, these are sanity tests that we need to run continuously while we develop. I'm going to leave this open on the side. I'm going to go ahead and run dev on here again, just because we're more comfortable kind of looking at this particular terminal. And I'm going to go ahead and do some other stuff here, which by the way, I'm going to go ahead and copy these commands and just paste them because it's just so much easier to do it that way. What I'm doing right now is just making directory. It's going to create a parent directory. That's what the flag P is all about, in case there isn't one, but we already know there's a source directory. That would be the parent directory of routes. And it's going to go ahead and touch or create a brand new test router.ts. So it's going to create this test router on this TS. Let's go ahead and bang that out. Looking good, and we should have a test route.ts here. Now what we need to do with that test route is actually create the code for it, or rather paste the code for it, because I'm not going to sit here and type all this out in front of you. It's going to be painful. Again, that's going to be our test route.ts. We're going to go ahead and save that one, and we're going to go ahead and create a route, so, or rather a controller at the same turn. So we're going to go ahead and paste our controllers folder and our test routes.ts. Again, because we already have our controllers folder, that command is, negligible, but I still felt like putting it in there. We're going to go ahead and copy and paste some of the test controller. Am I getting that right? Test controller. Let's write the test controller.ts. Let's write the test route.ts. So am I in the routes? Did I get that backwards? I did get that backwards. So let's go ahead and Control A, Control X, and this one goes here, Control V, and then we're going to go ahead in our buffer and find the, not that guy, go in our buffer and find the import express from express, and yep, that's the one. Okay, so this is going to be our test route.ts, and we have our test controller.ts. It likes it. It's going to return some individual declarations and merge declaration. Test health must be all exported or all local. We'll deal with that in a little bit. Let's just hope it's not a big problem. We do have some problems. It's those individual declarations. Let's see what we can do to kind of accommodate those. And let's go ahead and update our app.ts to include all these latest changes, which should do away with the problems, I believe. Maybe not. So we are having some issues. Oh, it crashed. It crashed. So let's see what's happening here. But before we do that, let's see this. Nope. So it crashed. And it didn't like it crashed right there in the test health. So let me come back to you. Okay, so there was some kind of circular dependency. I'm using AI, Claude AI in particular, to generate my code. I'm not generating this code myself. I'm kind of doing it piecemeal, so that I created a project within Claude.ai. I don't want to get into that because it's obviously a whole different set of skills that are involved. But what I've done is that I've created a project on how to create this REST API. And Claude AI is very good about most things, but it still will make its errors. So apparently there was an import statement that was circular, meaning the import statement was importing from the test controllers file, which was a no-no. So again, I've corrected that. I've refactored the code as per AI, and it's actually back to serving. Now what we want to do is that we want to see if we can curl this test health. And what I'll do is clear this up first so that we don't have a lot of busyness there. And we're going to go ahead and paste. And let's see what happens with our curl. Failed to connect. Oh, because it's curling on host 3000. My fault. I haven't told AI that, or Claude, that it's actually on host port 3002. Oh, there it is! So our real sanity check actually passed. Let's see what happens when we go ahead and forward this port. Still getting the cannot get error. Again, because the port is forwarded, and I know you guys didn't see that, but trust me when I tell you. Because the port is forwarded, we're still getting some errors with the actual browser presentation layer, but that's okay. We're good. We've passed a major sanity test right there. It returned our JSON file properly. Okie dokie pokey. Let's get on the last part of this lesson, which has already run nearly an hour. Let's go ahead and create a database connection. Also, let's create a interface so that we can actually model our database. Let's do that first. So let's change directories. I always like to be working on the actual directory, and the directory is var with a V. Var, remember to tab into your commands. and this is going to be REST API. So we're at the REST API, and then furthermore, we want to create a directory on the source. So let's go ahead and cd into source. And I don't know if you remember the command, but it was we have the directory. Do we? Let's see. Let's look at our directory structure here. And we have a models directory, which is exactly where we need to go. So let's go ahead and go into models. And let's go ahead and touch a new file. Not tough, but touch. Let's call it menu items. And it's going to be a TypeScript. Boom. We created a menu items. I don't know if you saw that jump, but that meant that it did something. So let's look at our models. Let's look at our menu items. And let's go ahead and copy an interface. Now, what is an interface? An interface is just basically a descriptor of what the item looks like. So we're going to have item name, description, price, and category. So let's look at the MySQL actual database that we have available. And again, I created this database beforehand. It is a database in order to facilitate item ordering and item order management within a restaurant. And we're just going to look at the columns here. So there is an item ID, item name, item description, and item price. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this all looks like. Item ID, item name, item description, and price. And what we need to do right now is basically disable this MySQL view so you guys could see the actual item name, item description, item, by the way, I'm looking at it, but I know you guys can't see it. So we need to make some corrections here, and I will correct accordingly. So give me just 1 second to get my stuff in place here, and we're going to go ahead and say item underscore description. We're going to say this says price, so that was correct, and item name, item description, price, item ID, sorry, so I forgot my item ID. And the ID field is pertinent because it's going to be our unique identifier, and it's also going to be our foreign key, so that we're able to uniquely identify the item number with, say, the patron or the employee who's making changes to that. Okay, so we have our interface ready, and we're ready for the next step. Okay, so for the sake of continuing our database connection test, let's go ahead and cd out of here, and we're going to cd into the controller or controllers directory. So we're in the controllers directory, and now we need to touch again, and we're going to go ahead and touch. If I could just spell, we'd be doing wonderfully. We're going to touch a file called menu. Again, if I could spell. Okay, I did find it. It needs to be populated with code. Hopefully it won't yell too much. No, there doesn't seem to be any problems. And our problem with menu item is, or its corresponding type, it's going to yell about that. Let's see how we can fix this in just 1 flat second. Haha. Another one of these little nuances from programming, right? So our menu items, plural, .ts is misnamed. We can actually go right here and rename the file. Actually, if I grab the right file, sorry. Where's our menu items? It's going to be within our models. And we're going to go ahead and rename it to menu item, singular. Go ahead and enter into that, and boom, our problem has subsided. Our problem is going away. Our problem did not go away. So this is the real deal. I was finally able to, I basically rewrote this entry, and then I realized, oh, it's actually referencing all the items called description. So I'm gonna have to find and replace all. Let's see here. I'm gonna find description and replace with item description. And I'm gonna go ahead and do it all one shebang. I'm gonna find a category. And I'm gonna replace that with item ID. I can do it all in one big shebang. And any other issues? Nope, I did it. So we refactored our code successfully, and now we are ready to rock and roll. Let's go ahead and save that before it stops working again. After editing my video and realizing what a poor job I did trying to explain the different components, I realized I have to backtrack and do a little bit better of explanation. So what you see right now is the menu test routes that we're going to use to be able to test our menu endpoints. Now, what are routes? In basic terminology, they define an endpoint, right? They map the HTTP methods. The HTTP methods are like the verbs, right? They're what the process is wanting to do, whether it's get, post, update, or delete a certain data point. And the routes just make it simpler to map to that endpoint. When you go to an online service or a website and you want to see, for instance, the ESPN is a perfect example. ESPN has routes for like New York sports, which I'm a big fan of. So you go to espn.com/New York. I think it's with a dash. Be that as it may, you can see the particularities to the New York sports team once you enter that URL, or rather URI, unique resource identifier, which identifies that particular page in the ecosystem within the web server. So just to be clear, now in this particular case, we're going to post some data, and the system created a, by the system, I mean the AI, created a route /create, because it stands to reason that if you're going to post an item, you're going to create that item. So now let's talk about controllers within the REST API ecosystem. Controllers are intermediaries between the business logic and the REST API. So what they basically do is they handle HTTP requests and responses. HTTP requests being the verbs, get, post, update, and delete. They validate input data, so you're able to create input parameters and code within a controller in order to validate the data. In our particular example, we actually created a model that basically allowed us to use strings or numbers. Those were the basic two data types that we created within the model, and the controller actually validated that those inputs were actually numbers and or strings, and if not, we could catch that error and return it to the user or return it to the developer or log it. They call appropriate services. So for instance, the endpoint will actually point to, or the conglomeration of endpoints can actually point to like different databases or different resources. You could have some data in a NoSQL database, some data in a SQL database. That's just a simple example. And the controller will actually point to the right resource as it comes in from the end user or the client using a browser or Postman or whatever front-end application you could imagine. They format the responses. So one of the key parts of our particular REST API, and most people use, is JSON. So we format our data in JSON or JavaScript object notation. So we can package it neatly and then send it to the user, and the user actually sends us a JSON request, whether it be get, post, update, or delete. That's all packaged in JSON in our particular application. There's many other formats like XML and what have you, but for the purposes of REST APIs in general right now, JSON is the standard. They manage errors. So again, with that try-catch clause that we can create within the controller, we can actually manage errors, and I can actually show you some of that as I go along. I'm sorry I didn't think about that, but of course this is important. Let's look at our controllers, and we will see that it'll try to post this menu item, right? And I keep forgetting to do this, like the code. It'll try to post this menu item with these particular entries for each data piece, but it'll also return an error if something fails. Now, the regular standard error is 500. That is a nightmare because that error is probably the most difficult to kind of chase down. But it'll return a error, in this case a standard 500 error, but that's as simple as it gets right now. And finally, it'll apply middleware, which is kind of the intermediary. Now let's talk about config. So I have the actual config db.ts file open, and we can see that what it's basically doing is just allowing us another layer of security as well. It's using the environmental variables to create, in this case, a pool, which is a connection request. And this pool is going to be exported throughout the application as a default, so that this connection is actually being used by every other component within the application. It allows us to procure sensitive data management, or looking for the proper word. It allows us to manage data sensitively. So with, again, the environmental variable back in to the fold, as you can see, the environmental variables are being loaded here, and the environment or the .env file is not present, and it's not going to be uploaded to GitHub or available in case there's a breach in the server. It creates validation rules, it feature flags, service endpoints, and logging levels. So you could do all that within the configuration folder. In this case, we're just looking at a db.ts configuration, which is just basically connecting to our database. But the folder config concept or abstraction is so much more than just that. And let's finally talk about models. So I have the menu items.ts file by which we generated or created a interface called menu item. And within this interface, we basically defined our data types. So basically, it's also creating a layer of validation as well, because the data types have to be this particular type for each particular instance of the data that we may enter or even query. It allows us for schema definition, data validation, database operations, and relationships between models, right? So we can kind of expand it to even create the relationships, such as in a relational database, we may have separate tables. Our order table may be associated with our patrons or clients, just like our order table may be associated to also the menu. So we have to have kind of links between those tables. We can validate those sort of structures here within the models subfolder, okay? And it also allows us to transform our data and to sanitize our input. In other words, again, we can catch errors more easily within the controllers layer if we tell the controllers layer, let's make sure that our data is modeled as such. And then the controller data, or the controller layer, or the controller test controller can catch those errors and return an appropriate error either to the log, to the user, or to the developer some way, somehow. So That is the gist of our models functionality. Okay, so let's bring it all together now. It has been a long video, I know. What I want to leave behind is actually the code in GitHub, and I will provide a link on the descriptor in the video below. But what I also want to make clear is pretty much how our own application is working, right? So let's go ahead and run one final, let's call it a test. It's actually going to post this information on the database. So let me go ahead and open up the database so you can better see how that happens. But I want to go ahead and break down what this curl option is going to do. And let me go ahead and make this text look a little bit larger. It's actually pretty small, so, and I really need to kind of show you guys. There we go. And we're gonna go ahead and bring this in a little closer. Let's put it right here in the middle. All right, so let's look at this curl. As of right now, the curl command is only going to create. So there is our famous little create route. There's just our famous localhost 3002. And it's going to, by the way, the database also has item pick, but I'm just going to leave that null for the time being. It's going to enter these items: price, item description, drink of the gods, item name, and beer. Notice how it doesn't really enter item ID, because the database is programmed, MySQL database is programmed to automatically generate that ID if it comes in null. That ID has to be generated. It has to be not null, as the terminology in SQL states, and it has to be a unique identifier. So if we don't enter an item ID, the database itself will. But we need to change some of the values in this. Let's just call it Sprite, and let's just say that Sprite is a fizzy clear drink as a descriptor. And we'll leave it at $5. We'll leave everything else pretty much the same. The item pick is going to be null. And let's go ahead and try to run it. By the way, let's keep on going down our line here to make sure that we are actually doing it correctly. Our content type is application.json, so that you understand that this is going to be a JSON format. Actually, this very format that you see here is going to be JSON. It's encased in curly brackets, separated by commas, and our command is going to be post. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. By the way, before I even run this, let me go ahead and bring forward the database, to MySQL database, because I have it available. If I could just find it. Where is it? Come on. It's not Mozilla. Maybe it was. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. Here it is. So I have not opened it, or I haven't made it available. I need to bring it up on the screen. So yeah, that's fine. Let's just put the command here and the database here. And we are going to run this command right now, and we are going to look at our menu items table, which is right here on the database. And let's go ahead and run this command. Boom. Menu item was created successfully. Now, in order to see that menu item created successfully, by the way, I just created a menu item for Coke, we need to refresh our database, which is, oh, lost connection. Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and close out of here, and we just revamp our connection. I kind of enjoy doing this the way I have with all the humanity. Here we go. Here's the entry. All the humanity embedded here in this video. A lot of content creators leave out all the fumbling around. They're very particular about creating these perfect videos. I'm glad that I fumbled around a little bit and you got to see some of the troubleshooting techniques that I used in order to troubleshoot said videos, because believe me, one of the most discouraging parts of development is to see these like incredibly talented individuals online that just seem to get everything perfect as they go along. And you know, imposter syndrome is a thing, and no matter how advanced you get in this career, you will always feel like an imposter. I promise you that. You will always feel like you're not good enough. You'll always feel like everybody's better than you. And I no longer feel like that as much because I understand my limitations, and I understand that I'm not a coder. For instance, there's a lot of people that are just very good at like typing out all this code. I am not that. I understand what the code does, but I'm not going to type out all this code in like an hour or 2 hours. I'm not going to write what are the some of the terminologies are like 100 lines of code an hour or something like that. You know, like perfect code, not just lines of code, but like perfectly debugged code. Those are insane thresholds to be sure, especially when we have AI today. AI is going to be our coder. AI is going to create the code that we need. And here's proof. The proof is in the pudding, or in the Sprite in this case. And our curl basically stated, go ahead and insert this data into that database, and it then returned the message saying the item was created successfully, and we can verify in our backend. And I know I promised Postman. I wanted to do Postman, but this video got terribly long, so I did a curl post instead. And the post is the most crucial of all the verbs or HTTP methods, because post is actually writing to the database. So you can basically say that if I can post something to the database, I can definitely get something from the database, and I could delete items from the database. So that's why I went with post in this tutorial. You know what? I thank you so much. Let's recap what we need to do as far as our database is concerned, and let's go ahead and minimize this window and minimize this window to look at our actual database, or rather code. Actually, let's just go ahead and blow that away, and blow this way, and blow this way, so we can actually focus on our actual code. Let's look at what's happening here. Our app is basically running the show, right? So our app is at the root of the directory, not source, but rather, source. I'm sorry. Our app is at the root of the source directory. Here it is. And this is the guy that's the band leader. You know, he's running the orchestra. Our routes are determining, let's look at the particular menu test route. They're determining that create is going to be the endpoint by which we can post items. Our models are creating the model home, if you will, when you go and you ever have a chance to go buy a house and it's still under construction, you go to the model homes. There's usually 2 or 3 depending on how big the construction is, and you can gauge a feeling for what your home is going to look like thanks to the model home. This is a very similar concept here. It's an interface that basically models our data, and this allows us to enter data or delete data or read data from a database. Our controller is where the business logic lives, right? So we know that we need to insert into menu items, which is the name of the table. We know that we are working with our active pool query, which is rather our active pool, rather, which is our connection to the database, and we use the function of query within the pool in order to use actual SQL to be able to write to the data. So this is actual SQL code that is embedded within our code. We get status returns backs because this is going to be a try and catch situation. So this is what we got in return when we curled it. We got menu items created successfully, which means that it actually posted all these items to our database. Okay. And then finally, we got routes, we got models, we got controllers, and our config, by the way. Almost forgot the config. Probably one of the most important parts of this is where we basically configure our database connection and things of that nature. So that's pretty much the breakdown. I like the fact that I did it so in such a human way that I made my mistakes. I went back. I basically troubleshoot it with you guys on, watching me. I stressed out a lot. It took me 3 days to make this video. So just so you know, this wasn't easy by any means. I don't know everything, but I'll be honest with you, Claude AI has really made me extremely productive, and it's helped me kind of reverse that imposter syndrome that I've been suffering with for years and years that I've been in this field. So, I think I've covered it all. I think the test came out very well. We were able to populate our database, and I think this is going to be for today. This is going to be it for today. REST API with TypeScript and Express and MySQL and obviously Node.js and a little bit of Apache, a little bit of Ubuntu, a lot of Ubuntu, I get it. But Ubuntu is still our go-to server, for web development. I know there's a lot of, CloudFront and Cloudflare and Amazon Lambda and Google Firebase. There's a lot of tools out there to be able to avoid all this configuration nonsense, and it is very tedious, as you saw. But right now, the classic web development engineer or developer is going to be using an Ubuntu box somewhere in the cloud. And as a matter of fact, Ubuntu is still I think 58% of all the web servers are Ubuntu. I think higher than that even. So I may be speaking without looking at the actual data, but it's a pretty fair chunk of the web servers out there. Anyway, I've yammered on enough. I thank you so much for listening. I'll have all this stuff down in the description. And thanks for playing along.